All right, hello everyone, and welcome to yet another Renegade Con interview. I'm your host, Chris Whiphand, and I am joined today by one of our newest members around here in Renegade Town, Matt Holland. Matt was recently brought on as the Sales and Marketing Program Manager to kind of help do some stuff that we'll get into in a minute. So how you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing great, Chris. How about you?
I'm doing well, man. I
You
love
enjoying this Renegade Con?
I love getting ready for this and doing it, and it's just I just energized by the whole process. I love it to death. So,
Awesome.
if we can't do it in person, this is about as good as I can get. So I can't complain too much. I don't miss running around halls trying to get from A to B.
Yes.
Because especially with doing some of the programs we're going to discuss here in a bit, they tend not to be nice centrally located things at all.
They're not just in your booth. Yes.
No.
I have walked many a mile at Gen Con.
Oh, I can only imagine. Only imagine. So before we get into the nitty gritty of what you're going to do and, what kind of really made it perfect for you to come on board, let's get to know you a little bit. Now, I know
Sure.
you've had an interview with us already, and you've kind of, done the our interview process and put it out there. So we'll kind of breeze through this. If anybody wants to find out, go check out the Radio Society. Matt has a great
It was
interview there.
Vampire Wednesday.
The Vampire Wednesday?
Vampire Wednesday from early January, I want to say.
There you go. Yeah, so check that out if you really want to deep dive on Matt's history. That's a great place to start. But real quick, let's get to know you a little. Let's get comfortable here, Matt.
Sure.
So what got you into board gaming? What kind of brought you in?
For me, it was a copy of Power Grid that my little sister got for
Really?
Christmas one year. I had never played a modern board game. I had never played Catan. I'd never played anything like that. And she got it. She was very excited about it. We played it Christmas Day. And it blew my mind, all the things that were going on, all the interesting decisions. And I had to crush my sister and my parents, but it was just something I'd never experienced before. And then I dove in to the deep end, found Board Game Geek and just started playing a lot more board games.
That's a very interesting one to start with. I mean,
Yeah.
especially when you have that auction and trying to make sure that there's a lot going on in
What
Power
blew
Grid.
my mind was there were turns, there were phases, there were rounds, there were steps. Like the hierarchy of processes in that game for a newbie is just crazy. But we got through it and enjoyed it.
Awesome. And you probably totally undervalued the 22 power plant. You can't. You gotta, it goes for almost double, let me just say. Cool. Awesome. So do you really enjoy those kind of deeper thinking games? Like where's your happy spot?
I am really kind of an omni gamer. I love the Euro games and the kind of heavier board games like that.
Right.
I like miniature wargaming. I like card games, like competitive card games like Vampire and a lot of the other ones I've worked with or just played. I do all that kind of stuff. So I have quite a collection and play, at least in a normal year, non-pandemic year, what most people would consider a ludicrous amount of different games.
Right. Is there this feeling, do you get like you need to kind of have a little bit of something for everyone? Like you kind of need... I
do. I feel like if I'm going to be hosting, I will have friends over, and there are varying levels of gamerness, and I like to have something for everybody. And I love showing somebody that game that really clicks with them. That person who's like, oh, I've enjoyed this game, I've enjoyed that game, but like, oh, this one really spoke to me. I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited about playing it. So that's always really cool to do.
Yeah.
There's so many good choices. I don't want to have to only be a Euro gamer or only be a more thematic gamer. Like, I'll take it all.
Right. I love having that board game concierge kind of feeling. Like trying to find the perfect one for that person it's great.
It's rewarding.
It's a good feeling. Absolutely. Absolutely. So how did you end up working in the business, coming from like being an omni gamer and playing all these games and starting out with Power Grid, and this isn't your first job in the business, so how'd you wind up here?
I still live about 15 minutes from Fantasy Flight Games in Roseville, Minnesota. I'd gotten very big into X-Wing That was the game
Okay.
that took over my life for a couple years, playing hundreds of games every year. And I
Wow.
had met playtesters who were local to Minnesota here, got involved in playtesting with them, met some people at the company. I played at the Fantasy Flight Game Center. That was my local FLGS.
Nice.
So when a job opening popped up that I was qualified for, it was actually in the events team, hiring and running a demo team for them. I
Hmm.
applied and got the job, and I've worked in the industry ever since, about 5 years now. Well, actually, 5.5.
Cool. So, what made you want to leave the backyard company and come work for Renegade?
Uh, Renegade has a really nice stable of games. It's also a much smaller team
Hmm.
and a place where I felt like I could maybe have more of an impact or get to try some of the things that couldn't try at my past position. A lot of it just due to the size of the company or the particularities of working with some of the really high profile licenses that Fantasy Flight worked with.
Right.
Uh, Renegade has a lot of its own lines, and I think that we are able to do some really cool stuff with like World of Darkness, some of these other licensors, and I'm just excited to be able to do that kind of thing, expand my skills and expand my kind of horizons too.
Awesome. So, one of the other things you kind of did was, in running the demo team, you also kind of worked on leading the organized play.
4 years in, I switched over to the organized play team at Fantasy
Okay.
Flight Games as a community coordinator. So, kind of the community manager for the 6 or 7 different large communities that were played various Fantasy Flight OP
Okay.
games.
Now, when I hear organized play, I just think like, the big one, Magic. And it's just like this big
Sure.
thing, and it's just like, oh, you have to follow rules. There's all these judges. And, to me, it kind of sounds just this big thing that I'm like, I don't know. Did,
Intimidating too.
yeah, it's very intimidating. So how do you see it being on the other side? Like, because to me, it's scary.
It's organized play to me is a lot of things. It is that huge, the Magic Grand Prix or World
Hmm.
Championships, the big events you see at Gen Con. It's that stuff, but it's also, the Wednesday night at your local game store where you and half dozen friends get together and play casual games. It's also the weekend where you load up and go to a local game store in like Omaha, get a hotel with your buddies, and have a good time playing a game down there against new people you've never played against. Uh, it's also a event like a co-op. Some of these co-op games will have an organized play event where you can go to the store, play a cool scenario, play some extra challenges, maybe play with some people who you don't always play with, or you play solo usually. It's a very different experience playing some of these games than 4 player if you're used to playing solo.
Right.
It can be a lot of different things, and I'm excited about exploring those different avenues with Renegade titles, um, and just kind of putting some of the things that I've seen work really well into action with Renegade.
Awesome. So speaking of that, like obviously you have this background and it's probably a big reason what attracted Renegade to you and you to Renegade because we're kind of at this stage where we have a lot of properties and we have a lot of games that would probably lend itself very well to doing the organized play model.
Yeah,
So what are we thinking? What's going to come out of the gate? What are the hopes and dreams?
the big, I think the impetus behind bringing me on board was Vampire Rivals.
Hmm.
That's an expandable card game, similar in model to like the living card games that I dealt with at Fantasy Flight Games. It's a competitive 2 to 4 player game, and that is going to be the kind of initial focus for Renegade Organized Play. We want
Okay.
to have kind of a full slate of options for people who are playing Vampire to engage with that game. We also want to continue to grow our support for other communities like the Power Rangers community, some of the other upcoming Hasbro games. We want to develop a big community around those. We want to have options for as many of the games that make sense to have not necessarily tournaments in every case,
Right.
but additional ways to engage with the game, additional ways to enjoy it, additional ways to
Hmm.
get involved with the community around the game. But Vampire is going to be the big one because it has that competitive nature. It's got the expandable aspect. So, we're going to build this world, build that card pool, and have people. We want to give people a reason to
Hmm.
really dig into the game, to explore, and like a motivation to push their gameplay to new heights.
So that sounds pretty amazing, but nobody has vampire yet. It hasn't hit our shores, so
I mean, you guys don't have.
I
Oh,
no, we're
oh, okay.
not
I'm
all
gonna
of
put
us
that back
get.
away for
Yeah, exactly. You're just showing off now because Um, but we don't have copies yet. So how are we going to launch a league or OP when we don't have copies yet? Is
now.
there a
We are
plan?
very fortunate in this case that Renegade implemented Vampire Rivals on Tabletopia.
Hmm.
So it is not a. It has some restrictions in that there's not really any way to do deck building effectively for that. There's some of the the hidden bidding and things will be a little bit more difficult than doing it at a physical table, but because the game's been delayed a little bit more than we wanted, just due to the state of the world right now, and the fact that logistics worldwide are just a complete mess at the moment,
True.
we are going to kick off Vampire OP with a Season Zero kind of pre-release league. It's going to be a very casual event, not super high stakes, not a
Okay.
really intense schedule, but we want people to start playing the game. We want people to start being excited about it, and we're going to give you a reason and a framework to do that in. With weekly rounds, we will be paired against someone who could be anywhere in
Hmm.
the world. You can set up and play them whenever you'd like to. You pick one of those 4 starter decks on Tabletopia, you play your game, you report it to us. At the end, we'll have some prizes for people who do well, and some participation acknowledgement on our forums for everybody who participates in the game.
Awesome.
It's not obviously a perfect solution, but given the fact that we're waiting longer than we wanted to for the game, I think it'll be a fun thing for people to do. It's not a huge commitment, and it'll hopefully get you so that when you get the physical game in your hands, you can dive in and be like, okay, I already know I like the Toreador deck. I want to
Hmm.
crack open that crit pack, and I want to maybe make some changes or shift some things around.
Right.
Give you some familiarity with the cards, and get you ready to go into your friendly local game store and play in a tournament.
Right. Now, a couple big conventions have announced that they're going to try and run this year. We have
Yeah.
Gen Con and Origins and perhaps even PAX running this year. Do we have plans to, if the game's available, to try and run events there?
Yeah, so in our OP announcement, which just went up 2 days ago, we announced something called the Prince of the City. So, Prince of the
Hmm.
City, if you know the game, is a title you can claim in game, kind of gives you agenda generation, helps you win the game. But we're going to hold Prince of the City events at large conventions or different places around the world eventually. So,
Hmm.
Prince of the City, Indianapolis, will be a Gen Con event. Prince of the City, Philadelphia, would be a PAX Unplugged event. We could
Okay.
have Prince of the City, Berlin, Prince of the City, San Diego, whatever, however we want to do it eventually. But we're going to try and start with those two, assuming that these two big events can happen as is safe and as is large enough to make sense to have a big event like this. Those are going to
Right.
be very different from this Season Zero League. Those are going to be a much more competitive atmosphere. They're going to
Hmm.
have much more swanky prizes. Really give you a reason to come there, do your best, and compete. An event like that will also have side events to give you an option to play maybe in a different way, maybe a reason to try some different cards or a different deck. It's going to try to make a whole event out of it.
Cool.
And
So,
if those events don't happen, we're going to have the prizes. We're going to be ready to hold that kind of tournament when it makes sense.
right. And that was going to be my next question is, so what are the plans if these events don't happen?
Yeah.
Is there plans to perhaps continue season zero longer if needed, just to keep people playing or things like that?
We don't have a plan to use Tabletopia as an organized play outlet going forward.
Hmm.
The It is set up to demo the game and to get people into it kind of pre-release. That was its intent.
Hmm.
That's what we're going to do. We want the eventual model for organized play and for playing Vampire to be physical in person at your friendly local game store, at your game club, that kind of thing.
Sure.
It's a nice stopgap, but it's not something that we want to use as a primary avenue going
Sure.
forward. We will, even if large events aren't happening, we will have organized play kits rolling out to your local game store that you can buy for like a club or an organization, and have smaller scale OP happening, even later this year, even if it's not safe to have 50,000 people in one place.
Right. Now, even though we haven't even really launched this yet, we're still mere days away from the actual announcement that just happened. What are some growth plans we can expect? Is there, you know,
Yeah, so our first, 2021 is kind of conservative. We don't want to make huge plans and huge commitments when it's
Hmm.
just so uncertain right now. For 2022 and later, if you look at that announcement, there's a little chart that talks about what's going to be possible in different seasons. Season 1, San Francisco, based on the core game, that's going to start from game release into early 2022.
Hmm.
In season 2, we want to start adding more Prince of the City events. So people who are maybe outside the United States, we want to make sure that we serve as many of them as we're able to. And people who aren't, near Philly or Indianapolis, I'm sure would like to have a Prince of the City event in their backyard.
Hmm.
Uh, Additionally, something like a Prince of the City qualifier event that could be held at a large local game store, like in a regional area. That's something that was going to have better prizes, that could bring in players from other metas, other cities to come in for the weekend and compete.
Sure.
Kind of a really nice. I loved events like that when I was playing competitive games because for many players, it was their first exposure to the world outside of their town.
Hmm.
You would meet players who had a different style. You would meet I met like the world champion X-wing player at the time. He's your round 3 opponent. Stuff like that is really exciting and really invigorating to a new player, and really communicates to them that the game and that the world is bigger than just the Twin Cities meta.
Right.
So I want to have an opportunity and a reason for people to make those little weekend road trips. We have plans for like charity events. We've got plans to have team events. You could have like a clan war type thing where you've got your Toreador and your Ventru, your Malkavians all facing off against each other. We have plans for more and bigger events down the line. We just don't want to. It's too uncertain currently to implement those in this very first year, which at this rate, many stores can't have any OP probably Q3.
Right. Now, you mentioned prizes. What kind of prizes do you see being for something like this?
The one of the things I loved at my past job is the variety of prizes that the team that I worked with was able to make, and I want to use a lot of that kind of stuff to give people those really cool status symbols that are also like. I am of the opinion that something like acrylic tokens or a really nice like plastic card, it
Hmm.
improves my play experience. Just the feel and the tactility of that kind of thing is
Sure.
awesome. Also, when you sit down an event and you take out your really cool tokens that you won, that's kind of it's. I don't mean this in a negative way. You're flexing on the people around you, like, oh man, like he was at that Prince of the City. He made top 8. Like, look at that playmat, or look at
Right.
that deck box he's pulling his deck out of. I think that's pretty cool, and it's a way to sort of show your bona fides, show your experience to people. So a lot of cosmetic, tokens, deck boxes, um, alternate art cards, full art cards, things like that. So you can just kind of personalize your deck. The card that's really special to you that wins you games, you can have a special version of that. Maybe something like foils, things like that. That many of these prizes will not be a mechanical uh, change. They won't give you a actual gameplay advantage over your opponents because we don't want to have a
Right.
situation like that. Um, but just that really feel special and feel worth the time and effort that you put into it. We also want to make sure that if you go to a big event like a Prince of the City, that you don't walk away empty-handed. Everybody will get something. Everybody will get something. You can go there, lose every game, have a
Hmm.
great time at the bottom tables. I mean, I've done it. It's not it's not as bad as it seems. Like everybody down there they know there's no stakes. They're just having a good time. But you'll get something cool. You'll get a souvenir, something to still have a good time and remember, hey, I met that person from, Budapest and I played against somebody from Detroit and a guy from Mexico. And just that's an awesome experience. And I want people to have that and to feel like they had a good time no matter how they did.
Cool. Now, let's say I'm going to a Gen Con and we have
Hmm.
an event scheduled there. How much time should I reasonably expect to, dedicate towards tournament play and things like that?
Yeah. Well, a big event like Prince of the City, that's going to be one of those events where you probably want to dedicate a day. So
Mm.
Saturday or maybe Friday, that will be your opening rounds of the tournament. And if you do well enough, you may play the next day in a sort of top cut. That's
Right.
pretty common for these bigger tournaments. If you're talking, 100 people or more, it's
Mm.
pretty hard to fit the number of rounds that you need to run a full tournament in one day. So
Right.
you may do 5 or 6 rounds of Swiss pairings and then on to a top cut the next day. Those who don't make the top cut are, of course, welcome to go do other events at the convention, or they can jump in and play side events, which, if you're not looking to spend all day Friday playing in the Prince of the City, I want to have smaller opportunities where the stakes aren't as big, the prizes
Hmm.
aren't as good, but it's a much smaller commitment, both financially and in terms of your time. Because being somebody who's been to those events in addition to workdom, it can be very hard to like fit everything in.
Yeah.
So we want to have an option for people to engage with the game in some way that works for their schedule at an event like a Gen Con or a PAX Unplugged.
Cool. So, what's going to be the best way for people to stay abreast of, what games are going to be playing, what OP might come in the future? How
Sure.
would you suggest they keep an eye out for that?
Well, we have a new little sort of page on the Vampire card game website
Hmm.
that covers organized play. That's going to have things like your tournament rules, your blank deck list PDFs that you can print out and fill out. It's going to have access to an event locator. It's going to have access to the card database. That's going to be your one-stop shop, along with our community forums, to keep abreast of what's happening.
Cool.
Any big events we have will be in that locator, and we'll make everything clear to people who are on that site. You also need to register for that site to participate in the upcoming league. So that's a great excuse to, if you haven't already signed up for the forums, to get in there and do so. So you can kind of find out what's going on and start playing Vampire right away.
Cool. Now, we do vampire things every Wednesday.
Yeah.
And you have another event coming up this Wednesday. So, if people have questions, we'll have a channel set up in Discord that you can go and ask questions. But are there other methods they might use to put them in?
Yeah. I'm going to watch the chat of this interview when it airs. So
Mhm.
feel free to type your questions in the chat. We obviously will not be answering them right now because we don't have a time
Sure.
machine. But on Vampire Wednesday on February 17th, I think,
I think so.
I will be on with Sarah and we will go through some of the questions that the community has posed in response to our organized play announcement. I don't expect that every question you have is answered in that announcement. I tried to anticipate, what people would
Sure.
want to know, but I'm sure there will be questions that come up or suggestions, and I want to be able to answer your questions and absorb any of those suggestions that are going to be useful for us to do a better job for you.
Awesome. So, yeah, be sure to get any of those questions in. On our Discord channel, there will be a special channel under the interviews that you can just ask questions there of people specifically, and we'll point you in the
Awesome.
right direction. So, yeah, be sure to check that out. Well, Matt, this has been awesome. It's great to learn about something completely new that we're doing, and I'm excited for what this holds.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward. I'm looking forward to it all. Having started to meet some of the community members, having done some Vampire Wednesdays, interacted with people who watch the stream, I'm really excited for the world of Vampire Rivals, and just for all the people who are excited to play this game. Like, I know it's not great that you're waiting an extra month or two now because of these
Sure.
logistics issues, but I love to see the passion that people have for the world of Darkness and just for this game in particular. As I've started to play it more and more, learned a little bit more about it, there's a lot to dig into there. So I think that people are going to be very excited once they have it. And if you are thinking about playing in the league, go ahead and do a demo at Renegade Con this weekend. They'll teach
Yeah.
you the game, and you'll be ready to kick off and start playing immediately. So
Yeah, and even to
definitely
the
recommend
point
that.
where, we saw a few people do little mini tournaments amongst themselves, because
Yeah,
it's free to play as well as demo all weekend. So feel free
yeah,
to, you know, kick the tires, push the buttons, do what you want to do, have some fun with it while you can.
yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it'll be available to people to play through the duration of this league. So you'll have some time to mess with it, but there's really no stakes. There's no cost to play this league. So sign up. Even if you get your butt kicked, you're going to learn something,
Yeah.
and you're going to be in a better position when you actually start playing the physical game. Because I mean, like I can tell you, it is real.
Yeah.
It's
And that's a
there and it's
bigger,
coming.
that's a much bigger box than I was expecting. I was expecting like a small little lanterns box. That thing's a good size. I'm impressed.
It's got what, 4 starter decks. It's got additional cards to mix up and deck build on your own.
Hmm.
I just did a stream last week with Matt Hyra talking about the strategy of deck building and why you might use certain cards or make certain decisions as before you're playing the game, because that's going to be with any of these games. That's a big part of it, and it can be intimidating to new players. But you can also just crack it open, and there are pre-made starter decks that you can play with right out of the box.
Yeah, and the other nice thing is, guess what? Now is the time because everybody's a new player. So
Yes.
that's no better time to jump in than the ground floor. Awesome.
Yeah. And the intent of the league is nobody's going to yell at you if you have to ask a rules question or if you're
Right.
not sure how something works. This is low stakes. We want to get people comfortable playing the game.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you, Matt, for joining us. I really appreciate it. And thanks, everybody at home, for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Renegade Con. We'll see you around.
Yeah, take care.